The crimson rain of Nexus Prime fell like tears from a wounded sky as Lieutenant Marcus Kane pressed himself against the crumbling wall of the medical station. The acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone filled his nostrils while distant explosions painted the horizon in orange flames. His pulse rifle felt heavy in his hands as he checked the ammunition counter. 30 rounds left. The evacuation was supposed to be simple. Get in, extract the human colonists, get out before the Valdari resistance fighters arrived. But nothing ever went according to plan on the Outer Rim worlds. The war had been raging for 3 years now, leaving entire systems as graveyards of broken dreams and shattered hopes. Marcus peered around the corner, scanning the abandoned settlement through the driving rain. Most buildings stood empty, their windows dark and lifeless. The colonists had fled weeks ago when the first reports of Valdari ships came through. What remained was a ghost town waiting to be claimed by whoever wanted it most. A sound caught his attention. Not the usual noise of settling debris or distant thunder, but something else. Something that made his heart skip a beat. It was crying, soft, muffled, but unmistakably the sound of a child in distress. His training screamed at him to ignore it. The mission was clear. Secure the area, confirm no human survivors, report back to command. But the crying continued, tugging at something deep inside his chest that had nothing to do with military protocol. Following the sound, Marcus moved carefully through the rain-slicked streets. The crying grew louder as he approached a half-collapsed residential unit. The building's roof had caved in, leaving twisted metal beams jutting out like broken bones. But beneath the debris, he could see movement. What he found made him freeze in place. Huddled beneath a makeshift shelter of fallen concrete and metal sheets was a small figure, not human. The distinctive silver-blue skin and elongated limbs marked her as Valdari, but she was just a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old in human terms. Her large, luminous eyes were filled with tears as she clutched a torn piece of fabric to her chest. Marcus had never seen a Valdari child before. The war had been fought between adults, soldiers, and warriors who chose their sides. But this little one had done nothing wrong except be born into a galaxy at war. She looked up at him with those enormous eyes, and instead of fear, he saw hope. She whispered something in her native language, a word that sounded like a question. Her small hand reached toward him, trembling with cold and exhaustion. The rain continued to fall as Marcus made his decision. Slowly, he set down his rifle and knelt beside her. When he reached out, she didn't pull away. Instead, she grasped his hand with both of hers. Her skin surprisingly warm despite the cold rain. He could see injuries on her arms and legs. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to slow her down. She had been alone for days, maybe weeks. Somehow this child had survived when entire colonies had fallen. Marcus gently lifted her into his arms, feeling how light she was. She nestled against his chest, her crying finally stopping as she found safety in his embrace. The fabric she clutched was a child's blanket. Worn and dirty, but clearly precious to her. As he carried her toward his transport, Marcus knew he had just changed everything. The man would have questions. Protocol demanded he leave her behind. But looking down at her peaceful face as she finally fell asleep in his arms, he knew he could never abandon her. The rain began to lighten as they reached his ship. Whatever consequences awaited, he would face them. Some things were more important than orders. The mother's arrival 3 weeks later, the medical facility on Haven Station buzzed with quiet efficiency. Marcus sat beside the recovery bed where the Valdari child, whom the medical staff had named Kira, was finally showing signs of improvement. Her injuries had healed well. But the emotional trauma ran deeper than any physical wound. She had learned a few words of standard, enough to ask for water or to call his name. But mostly she communicated through gestures and those expressive eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond her years. The doctors said she was remarkably resilient, adapting to human medical treatment better than anyone had expected. Marcus had requested leave to stay with her during recovery. Command had granted it, though he suspected it was more about studying Valdari physiology than genuine concern for the child's welfare. He had become her unofficial guardian, the only familiar face in a world of strangers. That morning started like any other until the alarms began to wail. The station's defense grid detected an approaching vessel, small and fast, unlike any human design. It moved with the fluid grace characteristic of Faldari technology, slipping through their outer sensors like water through a net. The ship ignored all communication attempts and set course directly for the medical facility. Marcus was in the middle of reading to Kira when Commander Brooks burst into the room. His face was flushed with excitement and concern. "Kane, we have a situation. There's a Valdari ship incoming and it's not stopping for customs." Before Marcus could respond, the lights flickered. Something had docked with the station, forcefully. The sound of metal groaning under stress echoed through the corridors as security teams scrambled to respond. Kira sat up in her bed, her eyes wide with recognition. She spoke rapidly in her native language, a string of words that sounded urgent and hopeful. Then she looked at Marcus and said clearly, "Mama." The realization hit him like a physical blow. Her mother was here. They heard the sounds of conflict in the corridors outside. It's not weapons fire, but the controlled chaos of security trying to contain someone who refused to be contained. Doors hissed open and closed as the intruder moved through the station with purpose and precision. When the door to their room opened, Marcus instinctively stepped in front of Kira's bed. But the figure who entered made him forget all about defensive positions. She was tall, even by Faldari standards, with the same silver-blue skin as her daughter but marked with intricate tattoos that spoke of warrior status. Her hair fell in silver waves past her shoulders, and her eyes were the same luminous shade as Kira's, but harder. Filled with the kind of intensity that came from hunting across star systems, she wore form-fitting armor that had seen battle, and various weapons hung from her belt. But what struck Marcus most was the way she moved, fluid and controlled. Like a predator who had found exactly what she was looking for, her gaze swept the room, taking in every detail before settling on Marcus. When she spoke, her voice was rich and melodious despite the underlying tension. "You are the one who took my daughter." It wasn't a question, and her standard was flawless, though accented with musical tones that made even the simplest words sound exotic. Marcus found himself studying her face, noting the sharp cheekbones and full lips that spoke of beauty as much as strength. "I saved her," Marcus replied, maintaining eye contact despite the urge to look away from that piercing gaze. Kira called out from behind him, a joyful sound that broke the tension like sunlight through clouds. The warrior woman's expression transformed, instantly, melting into pure maternal love as she rushed to her daughter's side. The reunion was beautiful and heartbreaking to watch. Mother and child spoke in rapid Valdari, while tears streamed down both their faces. Marcus stepped back, giving them privacy while security personnel gathered in the doorway, unsure whether to intervene. After several minutes, the woman turned back to him. Her expression was softer now, but no less intense. "I am Zafina of the Starwind clan. You have cared for my daughter." She paused, studying his face as if memorizing every detail. "This creates obligations that must be honored." The negotiations for Kira's custody took place in a sterile conference room that felt more like a courtroom than a place for diplomatic discussion. Marcus sat across from Zafina, while various officials shuttled between them with documents and translation devices. The process was complicated by the fact that no formal treaty existed between humans and the Valdari. Since the war's end, Commander Brooks wanted Zafina arrested as an enemy combatant. The station's diplomatic corps wanted to use her as a bargaining chip in peace negotiations, but Zafina seemed unconcerned with their political maneuvering. Her focus remained entirely on her daughter and increasingly on Marcus. "Your medical facilities are adequate," she said during one break in proceedings. "But Kira requires connection to her heritage. She needs to remember who she is." Marcus found himself drawn into longer conversations with her as the days passed. Zafina had agreed to remain on the station while bureaucrats sorted through the legal complications, but only if she could stay near her daughter. The compromise was a shared quarters arrangement in the station's diplomatic wing. Living in close proximity revealed sides of Zafina that her warrior exterior had hidden. She was gentle with Kira, singing lullabies in ancient Valdari that made even the hardened medical staff pause to listen. She was also incredibly intelligent, speaking 4 languages fluently and demonstrating knowledge of physics that impressed the station's scientists. But it was the quiet moments that affected Marcus most deeply. The way she would sit by the observation deck, staring out at the stars with an expression of profound loneliness. The graceful movements as she performed what looked like meditation exercises in the early morning hours. The soft smile that transformed her entire face when she caught him watching her one evening. As they sat together while Kira slept, Zafina began telling him about her world. Faldara was beautiful once, she said, her voice carrying the weight of memory. Crystal forests that sang in the wind, oceans that glowed with bioluminescence, cities that grew from living trees. But the war changed everything. Marcus listened as she described the devastation that had driven her people to become nomads among the stars. Her clan had lost their homeworld 3 years ago when human forces destroyed what they thought was a military installation. It had actually been a civilian colony where Kira was born. I spent 2 years tracking the ship that took her, Zafina continued. Following rumors and ghost signals across half the galaxy, I never expected to find her, safe and cared for. She looked at him then, and the gratitude in her eyes made his chest tighten. You could have left her to die. No, Marcus said quietly. I couldn't. Their eyes met in the dim light of the room, and something passed between them. An understanding that went beyond words or species. Marcus found himself noticing details about her that had nothing to do with her alien nature. The way her lips curved when she smiled. The elegant length of her neck. The warmth that radiated from her skin. When she reached out and touched his hand, he didn't pull away. Her fingers were longer than human ones, but surprisingly gentle. Her skin felt like silk, warmed by sunlight. Among my people, she said softly, there's a concept called shattering. It means the recognition of a kindred spirit. Someone whose heart resonates with your own across any barrier. Marcus's breath caught as she moved closer. The scent of her was intoxicating, like night-blooming flowers in the ozone before a storm. When she pressed her forehead against his, he could feel the heat of her skin and the steady rhythm of her breathing. This is forbidden, he whispered. Many of the most beautiful things are, she replied. Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory. Her lips were softer than he had imagined, and she tasted of something exotic and sweet. When she pulled back, her luminous eyes searched his face. I should not feel this way about someone from your species, she admitted. Marcus replied, pulling her closer. But I do. The message from the Valdari High Council arrived on a frequency that shouldn't have existed. Deep space communications that bypassed every human monitoring system and delivered directly to Zephana's personal device. Marcus watched her face change as she read it, emotions flickering across her features like shadows in candlelight. Is it? He asked, though part of him already feared the answer. Zafina set down the device and looked at him with an expression he had never seen before. It was formal, almost ritualistic, as if she was seeing him through the lens of ancient tradition rather than personal feeling. The council has learned of Kira's rescue and my presence here, she said carefully. They invoke the law of life debt. You saved my child's life, Marcus Kane. By our oldest customs, this creates an unbreakable bond between us. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of bond? Instead of answering directly, Zafina moved to the center of their shared quarters and knelt gracefully on the floor. Her posture was formal, ceremonial. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of ritual. I, Zafina, of the Starwind clan, daughter of the Void Hunters, claim Marcus Kane as my bondmate and protector of my bloodline. The debt of life given must be repaid with life shared. This is the way of our people. The implications hit Marcus. Like a physical blow? You're saying I have to marry you? Not marry as humans understand it, Zafina replied, rising gracefully. But yes, bond permanently. Live as my mate. Help raise Kira. Become part of my clan. It is not a request, Marcus. It is a demand backed by laws older than your civilization. Marcus stared at her, his mind reeling, And if I refuse? For the first time since making her declaration, Zephina's formal mask slipped. Pain flickered across her features before she controlled it. And I must take Kira and leave this place. The council will consider the debt unpaid, and your people will be marked as oath-breakers. Any future peace between our species becomes impossible. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. And I will lose both my daughter's savior and the man I have come to love. The admission hung in the air between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. Marcus felt his carefully constructed defenses crumble as he looked into her eyes and saw not the demand of an alien warrior, but the vulnerability of a woman who had found something precious and was terrified of losing it. "You love me?" he asked. "Against all reason and tradition, yes," Zephina replied. "But love does not change duty. The law must be satisfied." Marcus moved closer, studying her face. What would this bonding involve? A ceremony conducted by the council? Exchange of vows that bind us for life. You would gain citizenship in the Starwind clan and responsibilities for Kira's upbringing. She hesitated, then continued more softly. We would share a home, a bed, a future. Our children would bridge to species. The thought of children with her sent heat through his body that he tried to suppress. But looking at her standing there, proud and vulnerable and beautiful, he realized the decision had already been made, somewhere deep in his heart. "The ceremony," he said quietly. "When tomorrow, when the council arrives." Her eyes searched his face. "You accept?" Instead of answering with words, Marcus closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was deeper, this time filled with promise and passion and the weight of a future they were choosing together. When they broke apart, breathless, Zephina rested her forehead against his. "Tonight," she whispered, "let me show you what it means to be claimed by a warrior of the Starwind clan." Her hands found the fastenings of his uniform as he lost himself in the luminous depths of her eyes. Tomorrow would bring ceremony and politics, and the complicated reality of bonding across species. But tonight belonged to them alone. 6 months after the bonding ceremony, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the starship. A Sharan, watching the blue-green world of New Valdara grow larger in the viewport. The planet was the first joint human Valdari colony, a symbol of the peace that had grown from his unlikely connection with Zephina and Kira. His wife moved up beside him, her presence still sending warmth through his chest, even after all this time together. She wore the flowing robes of a clan leader now, her status elevated by the successful peace negotiations that had followed their bonding. But underneath the formal attire, he knew every curve and line of her body as intimately as his own. "Nervous?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. Little Marcus admitted. "Leading a colony is different from following military orders." "You are not leading alone," Zephina reminded him. "We build this world together, humans and Valdari side by side." Behind them, Kira laughed as she played with a group of human and Valdari. Children who had already formed the tight bonds of friendship that knew nothing of species barriers. She had grown in the months since her rescue, becoming fluent in Standard, while maintaining her connection to Valdari culture. More importantly, she had healed from the trauma of losing her birth parents and found security in their unconventional family. The past months had not been without challenges. Some humans viewed Marcus as a traitor for bonding with a former enemy. Some Valdari questioned Zephina's choice to mate outside her species, but their love had weathered every storm, growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. They're intimate. Life had deepened beyond anything Marcus had imagined possible. Zephina was passionate and giving, teaching him pleasures that existed nowhere in human experience. But it was the quiet moments he treasured most, waking up with her silver hair spread across his chest, sharing morning coffee while planning their day, the way she hummed ancient lullabies while working in their garden. The medical scans had confirmed what they both hoped for but hardly dared believe. Despite the species difference, they were genetically compatible. The child growing in Zephina's womb would be the first human Valdari hybrid, a living bridge between two civilizations. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked, placing his hand over hers on the slight curve of her belly. "Our daughter will be born into a world of peace," Zephina replied. That is worth any challenge we must face. As their ship entered New Valdara's atmosphere, Marcus reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. 6 months ago, he had been a soldier following orders. Now he was a husband, father, and pioneer building a new future among the stars. The colony site spread below them like a promise made real. Human architecture blended seamlessly with Valdari biotechnology, creating structures that were both beautiful and functional. Gardens of earth vegetables grew alongside Valdari crystal fruits. Children of both species played together in parks that celebrated the best of both worlds. "Look," Kira called out, pointing to the landing pad where crowds had gathered to welcome them. "Everyone came to see us." Marcus smiled, squeezing Zephaniah's hand as their ship touched down. The cheers that greeted them when the doors opened spoke of hope and possibility. Human and Valdari voices joined together in celebration of the family that had made peace possible. That night, as they stood on the balcony of their new home, watching the twin moons rise over New Valdara, Marcus pulled Zephina close and kissed the top of her head. "No regrets?" she asked. "Only that I didn't find you sooner," he replied. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear Kira singing a lullaby that mixed human words with Valdari melody. It was the sound of a future being born, of two species learning to dream as one. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they worked to build their colony. But tonight, holding his wife under alien stars while their daughter sang songs of home, Marcus knew he was exactly where he belonged. The love that had begun with a rescue in the rain had grown into something that would reshape the galaxy. This was only the beginning.